Shalom. Welcome to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I am excited today that we will be joined by Dr. Walid Phares just in a little bit, probably about 15 minutes or so. He happens to be testifying as part, or at least participating in a committee meeting with Congress on Capitol Hill today. And so needless to say, real world situations take precedence over the show. So we understand that. We're looking forward to having him on. I'm joined in the studio also by Mark Finkelstein, Jewish Community Relations Director of Jewish Federation of Des Moines. And we will be talking with Dr. Phares in just a little bit. This week, to say that there's a few things going on would be a dramatic understatement. As we speak, deliberations are going on concerning a possible military strike against Syria, against the Assad regime because of their use of chemical weapons against the rebel groups there. Similar conversations are going on in Britain and in France. The British and French seem to be much more gung-ho about doing something than the United States necessarily is, and that could potentially have to do with the fact that both of those governments seem to be more strongly connected to the Muslim Brotherhood than the United States is. The Muslim Brotherhood being the main opposition in Syria. So where we have more concerns about who is necessarily going to take over after Assad leaves, those countries are much more strongly supporting the opposition in Syria than we are. It's a strange week in the Middle East when things in Israel really are barely being discussed whatsoever. Iran is barely being discussed. The entire Persian Gulf region is hardly even on the radar right now because things are so focused on the southeastern Mediterranean, eastern Mediterranean with Syria in the north and Egypt in the south, where Egypt has almost fallen off the radar in the last week because of the situation in Syria. It is going to be a rather how should I put this? The stakes in Syria are extremely high no matter what we do. If we don't do anything, the consequences are going to be severe. And if we do something, they could be. So it really is going to be a rather profound decision from the Obama administration as to what happens. I wrote an article today on the We Are For Israel website, which you can find through one2talkto.com, which you see at the bottom of your screen there, talking about the fact that not only are the stakes very high, but the situation is very difficult. The implications of what we decide could have much wider impact, but there are also moral and ethical obligations going on. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech. The president spoke, I think, very eloquently about civil rights yesterday. In fact, he had one of the best civil rights quotes that I've heard in a very long time. Said the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice, but it doesn't bend on its own. Is a very good statement about the fact that we have to take responsibility in making the world a better place and in advocating for those who are less fortunate. It is of significant importance, however, that I should add, that right before Dr. King spoke 50 years ago, Rabbi Joachim Prince spoke, and among the statements that he made in his speech was that the sin of neutrality is the greatest of our age. Greatest sin of our age. Apply that to Syria. We can't simply say we don't care who wins, let them all die. That's simply not a moral statement. It's not an ethical statement. No one who has belief that we are all created by God can possibly say, who cares if children die in conflict? And if you think that the use of chemical weapons by Assad is not a big deal, think about the fact that right now we've already probably had not only hundreds killed, maybe even a few thousand killed in chemical weapons attacks, But if Assad believes that he can do that with impunity, we could be seeing tens of thousands of people die. He could send chemical weapons, sarin gas weapons, and wipe out entire regions of population. The advantage of chemical weapons, of course, is you don't have to have troops anywhere near them. You could simply wipe out everybody in an entire area. They are vastly different from the use of conventional weapons, which require you to actually have troops participating in an event and potentially jeopardizing their own lives. And you can hide from conventional weapons. You can hide underground. You can hide in buildings. You can do all that. Sarin gas, you don't even know it's coming. It's invisible. It will kill everybody around. We have a moral obligation to respond, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Dr. Walid Phares says when he joins us later in the show. With that, we'll take a momentary break. We'll be right back on Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling.
We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Yes, now your favorite programs on Webcast One Live can all be watched and listened to on any Android or Apple device. Your phone, tablet, or iPad. Yes, your favorite shows on Webcast One Live are available live or on podcast wherever you go. Let me introduce to you some of our great shows.
My name is Justin Bennett with Strong Tower Consulting, where we passionately coach individuals, families, and businesses to make better financial decisions that help create success and eliminate financial stress. I offer a free 30-minute consultation where we find out where your situation is. I explain how I do my coaching services. Then it's up to you whether you want to continue. The Bible has, depending on who you believe, 800 to 2,000 scriptures that talk about money alone. So pretty important subject in God's eyes. That's one of the things that I enjoy doing, is help them see God's ways of handling money. You know, it's interesting. Most people that I ask, what would it be like to be debt-free? The common response is, I don't know. I don't think it's possible. But in 90 days, most of my clients go from, I don't think it's possible, to I'm excited. In 2 years or less, I will be debt-free. There's no tricks, no gimmicks, nothing being sold here. It's just learning how to do money well. This is Strong Tower Financial Hour, where we help people go from being broke and scared to having hope with a plan.
I'm Michael Libby. I'm the host of Insight on Business, the News Hour. We're seen live at 8:45 each Monday morning at Webcast One Live, or whenever you want on my blog or on the Internet. So what qualifies me to talk about advertising, marketing, and consumer trends? Well, it's my business. Insight Advertising, Marketing, and Communications has helped dozens of companies, small, medium, and large, learn how to use advertising correctly, and we pass that information on to you each and every week.
So when you want to watch your favorite Webcast One program, remember, there's an app for that. You know, there's an app for that.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein of the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines, our Jewish Community Relations Director. And we are going to be joined in just a few minutes by Dr. Walid Phares, who is a American scholar of Lebanese origins, who's one of the foremost experts on and commentators on global terrorism and Middle East affairs. And I had originally asked Dr. Phares if he would be able to join us last week to talk about the events in Egypt and the attacks on the Coptic Christian Church. And then things in Syria kind of deteriorated since. So We're going to certainly be talking about Syria and Egypt, and we'll talk really about the entire region and whatever else Dr. Phares would like to talk about. We'd like to thank Dr. Ronald Bergman of Bergman Folkers Cosmetic Surgery and Spa for his support of this show, enabling us to do what we do and share with you the information that we can share, helping to make our world a more understandable place. And it's amazing just how complicated it can get, Mark.
Yeah. Perhaps we can spend a few seconds talking about the peace negotiations.
Absolutely. Go. What are you thinking today?
Well, I'm thinking what your opinion is about the piecemeal, the overall expectation that something will be solved rather than breaking it down into units that are digestible.
Well, I think that the negotiations got so far off track in really over the last decade that I think they kind of have to rebuild the track that that negotiations can move forward. And the five major issues are border security, refugees, Jerusalem, and recognition of the Jewish state. Settlements kind of fall into the borders category, and as do territorial swaps. The simplest of those is probably borders, because the security situation could involve Israeli troops or international troops being stationed on the eastern side of a Palestinian state, whatever that's going to be. But regardless, and dealing with Gaza too as a whole separate situation. Regardless, the belief right now is that a comprehensive solution is probably not a possibility, but that some sort of advancement, long-term agreement on various kind of things, territorial development, sharing economic things, could certainly move forward. So there could be agreements that get us toward peace without having to push we need to do something now or else kind of agreement, in which case everything could fall apart very quickly.
Do you suspect that the talks so far are only about laying out the environment that we're talking about, or are they somewhat substantive yet?
My bet is that laying out the environment largely occurred before they even met, and that we're really dealing with substantive stuff. The problem is without a real deadline in which you're not going to have the ability to negotiate further and something needs to be done, it's very unlikely that you're going to have concessions made that are going to lead to advancement. This environment is conducive to getting the sides to talk and maybe getting them to understand what they desire out of the peace process, but it's not necessarily good to get them to actually commit to it, because the consequences of failure of the talks are not high enough. At least they're not high enough for the Palestinians. I mean, whether they're high enough for the Israelis is a different issue. The Israelis, I think, are worried about worsening relationships with Europe, and if there doesn't seem to be progress. The Palestinians, I think, have nothing to lose here. And when you have nothing to lose, a lot of the time you're also not willing to make any concessions to get anything.
Do you think there's pressure on the sides to agree on what can be agreed upon, or are we still playing the game that all the pieces have to be in place before anything is agreed upon?
I think the Palestinians would like borders to be agreed upon before they move to anything else. I think the Israelis want to see it as a complete agreement. Now,
borders are linked to security, obviously.
I don't think the Palestinians see borders linked to security. I think the borders want to know. I think the Palestinians want to know what their map is going to look like. And the Israelis are saying, you can't know what your map is going to look like until we can figure out what the security situation is, until we know what's going on with Jerusalem. The borders that you're going to have if we have to deal with hostile populations inside your country are going to be different than the borders you're going to deal with otherwise. The security arrangements that we're going to have to deal with are going to be different depending on what the borders are. all of those various things are going to be significantly impacted based upon the borders, and the other way around. The Israelis' concern is Jerusalem. The Palestinians say Jerusalem belongs to us, and the Israelis say, no, all this territory around here is going to be ours no matter what. You're in a difficult situation. We have Dr. Walid Phares on the phone with us. I believe he's just finished up his congressional hearing, so we're gonna go right to Dr. Walid Phares. Dr. Phares, welcome to Understanding the World.
Thank you so much, Robert. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
It's an absolute honor for us to have you on the show. So you were up on Capitol Hill today?
Yes, actually, it was not a hearing. It was a briefing because we're not in session now. So these were think tanks, some congressional offices meeting, and, of course, discussing Syria first, but also other important issues in the region. I mean, issues of concern and interest to you as well, I imagine.
Oh, there's so many issues to talk about. I'm kind of at a loss on where to begin these days and feeling kind of overwhelmed.
Hello, Dr. Phares. This is Mark in Des Moines. Nice to talk to you again, sir.
Mark, hello. Nice to talk to you, and hope to see you soon in Des Moines as well.
Thank you. My general question is with regard to the Syrian situation, is there anything about it that's terribly surprising to you?
Well, that's a great question. I wish it's the same question I get in the national media. No, it is not very surprising in terms of projections. I mean, we all remember, we had that conversation before, including in Des Moines, that in 2011, throughout that year, we were present in Iraq. U.S. forces were still present in Iraq. And by being in Iraq, we were at the east of the Assad regime, Jordan in the south, Turkey in the north, Sixth Fleet in the west. The regime was boxed. Besides, most of the opposition was still demonstrations, civil society, was not armed in the first 6 months. Unfortunately, by, committing to the withdrawal on time in December, the administration took out one of its important tools. Now it's trying to bring back some of those tools and units to the region to punish the Assad regime for allegedly using chemical weapons, while in 2011 we had all our presence there. So that would be one strategic mistake we've done. For the rest, as you know, I'm not surprised because Al-Qaeda has, because of our inaction for 3 years now, penetrated most of the opposition. I wouldn't say all of it, but most of the opposition. And on the other hand, because we abruptly quit Iraq without any alternative, without having a government behind us that would be our ally, Iran has penetrated Iraq, and now they are present in Syria, and Hezbollah is present. So to answer your question in one sentence, I am not surprised. If we don't have the correct policy, we're going to, at the end of the day, have to pay a higher price to fix it later.
Now, Dr. Phares, I have been looking at trying to figure out what the United States can do militarily, and I mean, potentially to affect the regime in such a way that they can't use can't use chemical weapons anymore, even to discourage them from that. And I'm trying to figure out how we could do that without potentially advancing regime change, doing harm to the regime in such a way that we advance the opposition's ability to take over.
Number one, I don't think at this point in time, even if it decides so, even if the U.S. will decide so, let's suppose we have unity of position here, everybody is okay, Congress, administration, and we move forward. At this point in time, we don't have even the capacity of a regime change in Syria in the next few weeks and months. Why? Because unlike in Libya, where the regime was isolated, he didn't have allies in Egypt, in Tunisia, in the Sahel of Africa. He may have had some support by the Russians on the Security Council, but that was it. They even, let go of him when they accepted the resolution 1973, allowing the use of force to some extent. So Assad is in a different situation. Assad basically is an ally, a strategic ally of the Iranian regime, and that's from Assad the dad, Hafiz al-Assad and Khomeini, and now Bashar al-Assad and Khamenei, which means that Iran will have to assist the Syrian regime, and they made their intentions known over the past 3-4 days. They said, if Syria is attacked or is hit, we will retaliate. So that's the first problem to deal with. Number two, the Iraqi leadership, though they don't demonstrate it all the time, but practically they are assisting Assad. They are allowing the Iranians to send weapons and to send past the Iranian elite revolutionary guards. But also, as important, to the west of Syria, Hezbollah is an ally. And across the borders, Hezbollah is sending weapons and actually is fighting inside Syria. So to answer your question quickly, regime change at this point in time would actually mean a war with 4 regimes. It's not one regime. So we need to be very attentive that even if we engage, even if it's going to be a salvo, couple waves of missiles and maybe bombing some of the issues, then you're going to have a reaction by all these 4 regimes. I hope the administration has made plans for that, because if we engage in military action and don't have projection, then it will be a problem.
Yeah, that was my concern. And I saw an article that Maher Assad may have been responsible for launching the chemical weapons in the 4th Division, and that maybe the United States and Britain would go in and attack the assets of the 4th Division, and that might be a reasonable thing for them to do. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this could potentially destabilize the whole government.
It could destabilize the government if we're talking about the Syrian government, I imagine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if it destabilized the government to a point where it would collapse, that would be part of something bigger that we could have done a while ago. The other problem that would emerge, if we destabilize or begin crumbling the regime, who are our partners for
Absolutely.
the second stage? Who will come to power? And are we going to have anti-American jihadists? That's the big question of the day. So, again, we were forced to move into this situation not because of our planning, but because of weapons were used, chemical weapons were used. And to tell you the truth, in my own analysis, I'm surprised that Assad used them. He didn't have to use them. But using chemical weapons, he knew that we will have to react.
Dr. Phares, reports today indicate that Russia has sent at least 1 warship to the Mediterranean. What is it doing there?
Look, Russia and Syria, we have to always remember, have a defense treaty agreement or cooperation military agreement. It's automatic. Russia also has a naval base in Tartus, which is one of the Syrian ports on the Mediterranean, which means that the Russians will have to show that they are present. Will that mean that the Russians are going to use their assets against ours? I hardly believe so. But this is a message by the Russians that if you are going to use air force or missile capacity, we will be there and we will equip the Syrians later. But my concern is not the first wave of whatever action we're going to take. My concern would be that the Russians will equip the Syrians in response to our first wave if we engage in it.
Dr. Phares, how do you read the American public these days with regard to the Syrian issue?
The public opinion?
Yes.
Well, look, you and I have been reading, and all of us on this conference have been reading what the talking heads, meaning the analysts, because the analysts and the commentators are the ones who equip the public with arguments. And there are 3 major opinions in town, and that was the essence of my briefing today. You have a school of thought, and it has its impact on the public, that says we have no business in Syria. This is the Syrian regime fighting against the opposition, mostly penetrated by Al-Qaeda. So let them fight each other. I assume this is a very widespread segment of the public opinion now. To this, if I may say, there is an argument of caution. Yes, that's true. But if both are fighting against each other, don't expect both of them necessarily to be weakened by each other. What's going to happen eventually is that Al-Qaeda would get stronger over the seculars of the opposition, and the Syrian regime will get more weapons and support from Iran and Russia. So let me push it one more inch on this show, on your show, and say that if we don't do anything and follow this path, okay, let them fight against each other. Eventually, months from now, they will actually get to a ceasefire and guess what? Partition Syria into two radical areas. That is not a good news for us. So while it may appear as a good news in the beginning, but in the long term, they are rational actors, and they will get to a settlement and then turn their guns against our interests. Second, quickly, is the public opinion that would support the notion of a regime change, such as Senator McCain. He has advocated the idea that we will bomb and will intervene and arm the opposition, the rebels in general, and Assad will go and we have a democratic Syria. There are a lot of details that have not been addressed in this issue. Because if we arm, we may be arming, not we may be, we will be arming the jihadists. Because they are the port of entrance to the Syrian opposition. And that would mean that we will replace Assad with a jihadi regime. Third option is what the president is trying to do right now, which is to be very cautious, which is to apply some sort of pressure on the Assad regime, maybe by bombing the Assad regime a little bit, and then bringing both sides, that would be the opposition and the regime, to Geneva with the Russians to make a much wider discussion of the issue. I would say good luck, because we don't control the process. We're not alone in this process. And finally, you have the rest of the public opinion that is very afraid, very concerned about the fact that an air engagement in Syria will mean that we're going to respond to any attack against us, including terrorism, and that would be a re-engagement in a war at a time that, at a time the administration is praising itself for withdrawing from Iraq and ready to praise itself to withdraw from Afghanistan, and here we're going to send divisions or forces to the region again. So you have all these ideas disseminated across the public opinion scope.
Now, Dr. Phares, one of the major concerns that I have, and I know the Jewish community generally has, is Israel's potential involvement. And my concern would be that if not only could Iran just respond, obviously, to any attack or Syria or Hezbollah and hit Israel, but certainly if they feel like the regime is in jeopardy, they might. So that's one concern I have that I'd like to hear your opinion on. And also the idea that if the United States and the allies are going to respond about the use of chemical weapons, is there a possibility that the regime would simply use a whole bunch of chemical weapons all at once against the opposition, knowing that they're facing a response anyway?
Look, Rabbi, your concern is absolutely legitimate, on both counts, on both grounds. Number one, Israel is not very far and remote from what's happening in Syria today and in the region in general. I mean, first of all, geographically, it's across from the border from the Golan Heights, and it's across from the border from southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, and it has to its southern flank Gaza with Hamas, which still acts as a strategic ally of Iran. So geographically, it's right there. But more than geographically, yesterday and the day before, over the past 48 hours, I've been on Arab TV and engaged in discussions with people representing all parties, including the Iranian, Syrian Hezbollah side and the Brotherhood side and the secular side. There is a common note, a common tone representing the views of the axis led by Iran. That would be Syria, part of Iraq, and Hezbollah, and the Iranians, who are clearly saying that if America strikes Assad in any form or shape, this whole alliance axis will strike back at Israel. So here we're not talking about possibilities. We're talking about determination on their part. And they're not doing it on ideological grounds only. That's important to understand. This is for them the way to get out of the trouble. This is for them the way to corner the Sunnis, to corner Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait by telling them, look, you are fighting me with the Americans, and I am fighting against Zionism, and I'm fighting against Israel. So This explains why we've been seeing now Israelis going and collecting their gas masks, and then their other equipment, because the Israeli government does not joke with those issues. And to come quickly to your second point about chemical weapons, the problem in Syria is that the regime has control over these type of weapons, chemical, biological also. We have not seen those yet. And also the opposition can and could seize some of those. And as I said earlier, the Iranian-Syrian axis could use them, including against the Israelis if cornered. And the opposition could trigger a confrontation also with the Israelis to show itself that it's nationalistic and jihadistic and what have you. So the Israelis are in a very, very delicate situation at this point in time.
Dr. Phares, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back from our break, I think we'll be on Skype at that point. So we look forward to hearing more in just a few moments.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershad.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
Enough said.
Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein of the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines, and we're joined by Skype by Dr. Walid Phares. Dr. Phares, it's great to have you on Skype.
Great to be with you. It's a great equipment, great show. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Mark and I have two very simple questions. I'm sure it'll take you 2 seconds to answer these questions. Number one, what do you think we should be doing regarding Syria? And number two, what do you think we're going to do regarding Syria?
Oh, good Lord. These are very simple questions, but can I begin with number two?
Sure.
We're not going to do anything from number one. That's almost sure. I mean, whatever I would like to recommend, unfortunately, at this point in time in Washington, decision makers, advisors, I'm not talking about the strategists, because the strategists, defense strategists, national security strategists, they always look long-term and try to see what is best on national security perspective. Policymakers are surrounded always with advisors, and advisors may not see eye to eye always with long-range national security interests of the United States. They add some stuff from here and some stuff from there. So let me begin with answering seriously now, number one. Number one is we don't have the capacity at this point in time to actually do a regime change and replace it with liberal Democrats or conservatives or something that would look like Sweden. It's not going to happen at this point in time. Plus, we don't have a stomach and we don't have a consensus to go ahead and do 4 regime changes that would be Iran, Iraq, Hezbollah, and Syria to affect the situation in Syria. So what we need to do is what we can do and what is in the best interest, first of all, of the United States, and second, of the people of Syria. And let me probably mention this for the first time nationwide through your program. There are players in Syria that we have not considered so far. The choice that was given to us was the Assad regime, that's an ally of Hezbollah, a terrorist organization, an ally of Iran, which sponsors terrorism, and a butcher in its own country. So that's a very bad player. Then we look at the opposition, the most visible part of the opposition, the one you see on YouTube and satellite networks, the one that is basically using jihadi methods, are Al-Qaeda-linked Jabhat al-Nusra and their allies. That's why many Americans are saying, what do we have to do between those two fighting forces? Well, let me introduce a notion that says that inside Syria, there are many players, many segments that are against Assad and against Al-Qaeda, that would like to actually move forward in Syria to establish a democracy. And when we say a democracy, you know, Rabbi, many people in America say, well, it's not a perfect democracy. Well, of course, it's going to be a mediocre democracy. From the French Revolution to the French Third Republic, it took many revolutions and many mediocre revolutions to get to where French democracy is. And we could apply this to all other democracies. So let's look at Syria and look at the other players. For example, let me introduce the northeastern part of Syria. You have a Kurdish community, about 2 to 3 million Kurds. And what are the Kurds doing right now? They are keeping the Assad forces outside and Al-Qaeda forces away. That's an opening. We should begin by dealing with the regions of Syria that are most likely going to be pushing back against the two threats, accept our support, and march in line with our general goals, American goals. Second, inside Syria, you have another minority, about 2.5 million Christian. 1 million of Syrian Christians is in the northeastern part controlled by the Kurds. So you have two players here. And then you have the Free Syria Army, which is the opposition. Now, we admit and we know that the jihadists have controlled large segments of the FSA, but there is a segment in the FSA made of secular officers who served under Assad. They don't like Assad. Of course, they don't like the jihadists. Have we reached out to them? I don't think so. We haven't seen them in Congress. We haven't seen them at the State Department or at the White House. So we need to reach out to those. My conclusion is, while we may not be able to affect all of Syria at once because of the contending forces and because of a lack of will that we have now, we need to reach out to much smaller size components that we can work with and create a safe zone for them. We don't need to clear out their zone. It's already cleared out. Support them the same way we did with Saddam Hussein, with the no-fly zone over the northern part, Kurdistan. That would be my first recommendation.
Now, you mentioned Iraq. We, I think, have completely lost track of Iraq. And it sounds like you're saying that Iraq is allied with Syria and Iran and are not necessarily doing what the United States would like them to do. Is that kind of the general perspective?
Yes, Rabbi, that's the general perspective. That is not, we don't need an effort to realize that. It's in the Arab media. It's, if you read Arabic media, and many among us can, and now it's in English, so we don't need to know the language, the debate is clear. The Maliki government, although not in public against us, is facilitating the passage of weapons from Iran to Syria and from Iran and Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon, which basically explain, for example, why Israel waged a strike, an airstrike twice inside Syria against weapons going to Hezbollah. So that's evidence number one. Evidence number two, the Iraqi government is allowing Pasdaran, meaning Iranian Revolutionary Guards, to travel first by land from Iran to Syria and by air. I mean, the airspace of Iraq is open to Iranian Air Force airliners and planes that would ship weapons and ammo to the Syrian regime. Now, it's not visible because the Iraqi government still has a lot of interest with us. So they're trying to play, we will get your support, but meanwhile, in the region, we are coordinating between Iran and Syria.
Dr. Phares, is it true that if the United Nations inspectors don't either find something smoking gun or don't, this will have an effect on the American situation?
It will. If that UN delegation or mission fails to determine, number one, that chemical weapons were used, number two, that they were used at the instigation or by order instructions from the Assad regime, we are we meaning the U.S. government administration, that is, in trouble, because we would have waged a campaign, a political one, a diplomatic one, and we are very close with our assets. We are about to do action while we have not been ensured that this weapon was used and was used by the regime. Now, what we have heard, Doctor, is that the intelligence community will provide the administration with enough information, hopefully accurate information, so before any action is taken, the international community will have to hear the case for Syria from the president himself. So that's why I do anticipate that if the president is going to give those orders, he will have to give them after he makes the case. He will say, this is what we know, this is what we were able to get. And President Obama will have to be, of course, very careful. He knows that. We had a similar situation in 2003, whereby we thought that they were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And in my view, and you know it, I thought, and I had indications that it existed. It was only sent out from Iraq before we do the operation.
Now, Dr. Phares, I originally wanted to have you on the show last week to talk about what was going on in Egypt. And the situations in Egypt and Syria are kind of, we're finding ourselves, on the one hand, in Egypt supporting the military against the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is attacking the Christian community. And then here we got in Syria, we've got the Christians on essentially largely supporting the regime against the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria. How do those connect, and what are your thoughts on what's going to happen in Egypt now?
It's good that we're going to be talking a little bit about Egypt. Yes, I have been following up the situation in Egypt for the last many months. Actually, I was in touch, continue to be in touch, as Mark knows, with the leadership of the Coptic community in Egypt and of secular democratic opposition parties, used to be opposition and now they're close to government in Egypt. And I have debated many Islamists who belong to the Muslim Brotherhood past regime and now the new opposition. So this is the situation. The administration, when the Arab Spring began in Egypt, made a choice. And that choice was to open up to the Muslim Brotherhood because they were advisors. I mean, they are not the experts. Politicians are not the experts. So the advisor would tell them, the Muslim Brotherhood are the reformists, the revivalists, and they could stabilize Egypt. So you partner with them and help them, and then you're going to have Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and if things will change in Syria as well, all under one force we can deal with. That's the doctrine that allowed Washington to move in the direction of the Brotherhood. What was missing here is that the Brotherhood are an Islamist / jihadi at times movement, which has its own agenda. You cannot just put it in a box and say, you Brotherhood, you're going to deliver a stable region, period. What they're going to take from you is your support to be able to defeat and bring down Mubarak, done. Then to sideline the military, then to marginalize the liberal youth, and then the country is yours. Then you have your own policy. Then you go against Camp David. I mean, the information that we had was that Mr. Morsi, while benefiting from our support, was preparing to bring down Camp David, but in stages. Now, many Egyptians, especially the youth, those who rose first in January of 2011, rejected the Muslim Brotherhood agenda. They know them. They understand that Mr. Morsi was in the business of being elected one time and then, setting the operation, the motion to establish an Islamist state. And if he establishes an Islamist state, the next elections will be won only by Islamist political parties. So a popular movement began in Egypt. And that popular movement we saw for many, many months. They were demonstrating, and the Morsi regime was suppressing them. So that the youth one day decided we're going to repeat the Arab Spring, but this time with secular forces. And they called the Tamarod movement, or the rebel movement, called for a massive demonstration. And let me just say one thing about that demonstration. 33 million Egyptians demonstrated in the streets of Cairo and major cities. BBC, which is known to be international mainstream, we're not always in agreement with them, but they said 33 million. Now, 33 million is a number that is 3 times the size of all those who voted for Morsi. So this is a legitimacy above any legitimacy that he has. The more important matter was not that 33 million just walked in the streets of Cairo. What did he say? That night, he went on national TV and he said, I'm going to wage jihad against you. There's a speech in which he said, I'm going to have blood and we'll, it's in the name of Allah, and so on and so forth. So basically, the army, when they heard Mr. Morsi saying that he's going to engage in a civil war, then sided with the demonstrators and told Mr. Morsi, you cannot do this. You're going to be in house arrest, and we're going to have another election. Washington responded by saying this is a coup. Now, there's a difference. A coup is done against the majority. A military coup is done against the majority. If you have the majority, it's not a coup. It's basically a majority manifesting itself by elections, by plebiscite, by referendum, by recall system. The bottom line is that July was the month whereby the military and the popular majority decided to tell the world, look, you didn't believe us on June the 30th, let's have another one. So here come July the 26th, and then there was, another demonstrations which also gathered about 35 million people. So my point here is that we need to understand that the Egyptian people do not want the Muslim Brotherhood, and that the United States will have to respect and accept the will of the Egyptian people. And of course, encourage the military to do 2 things. Shepherd the country towards democracy. They cannot establish a military regime. And we don't expect them to establish a military regime. And at the same time, they need to protect the Camp David peace agreement. If they do, respect those 2 components, let's see where Egyptians are going to go with the next elections.
Dr. Phares, Al Jazeera has opened up apparently a new network in the United States. It seems to be able to project its political philosophy all over the world, both in English and in Arabic. How does Al Jazeera, number 1, view the Syrian situation, and number 2, the Egyptian situation?
I will refer to Egyptians and Syrians and Arabs and Middle Easterners. So we're not going to take the opinion of American experts. We're going to just look at the region where Al Jazeera is and listen to what people from the region, journalists, media, intellectuals, students are saying about Al Jazeera. Those who support Al Jazeera are the Al Jazeera audience. And that would be the Salafists, the Islamists, ultra-Arab nationalists at some point, and then other elements who support the ideological idea of a caliphate, of an emirate, or in general terms, a rejection of secular societies, civil societies that are secular. This is the crowd of Al Jazeera, and it has many followers. We have to admit that, in the millions. But what is interesting is that since the revolution, the second revolution of Egypt, we start to see that silent majorities, the ones that advisors in Washington have been framing as pro-jihadist, pro-Islamist, those who did not engage in political activities, once offered a choice between basic civil society, peaceful options on the one hand, and Al Jazeera narrative for jihad and for Salafism and Emirate, they overwhelmingly chose the other one, meaning civil society. And the proof was that in Egypt today, you have 90% of media reflecting, let's say 65 to 70% of the population do believe that Al Jazeera incited for the Muslim Brotherhood takeover, incited for a jihad waged by the Muslim Brotherhood. These are not my quotes, and I go on Al Jazeera whenever I'm invited, but these are the quotes from 70 to 75% of media in Egypt. So that is the case in Egypt. The opposition, the secular opposition in Tunisia is also criticizing Al Jazeera, definitely in Syria and large segments of Iraq. Those who are against the view of the Salafists, and of course in this case the policy of Qatar, do criticize Al Jazeera. But it's not only those, it's not civil societies. Moderate Arab monarchies such as Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait also have said that Al Jazeera is not representative of the majority of Muslims and Arabs and is representative of the Salafi view. Now, coming to America, Al Jazeera has, and of course it's Qatar's money, bought a huge American network. They did not build it bottom up. They just bought from Al Gore, Mr. Al Gore, a huge network. I'd be interested in seeing how well the American mainstream public, not interested in the media public, will respond to that. If Al Jazeera America is going to be another, critic of America or anti-American or let's say far left organization, be it, there will be one more. But if it's going to act in the same way Al Jazeera Arabic does, by siding with the Wahhabis and the Brotherhood and the Salafis and trying to legitimize them, but in English, then I am projecting that a majority of American public will not be very interested in in Al Jazeera America.
We have a few minutes left, and there's one country that we've been talking about a lot lately that I think we're kind of leaving out of the discussion here, and that's Turkey. And what are your thoughts on Turkey's influence regarding Syria and Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood and in relation to the United States as well?
It depends which Turkey we're talking about. You have the traditional, classical, post-Ottoman Turkey that was a beacon of secularism. I mean, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was the founder of Middle East secular movements. He was even anti-clerical. He was the one who brought down the caliphate. So that tradition of very secular, and most recently in Turkey, very secular also means the liberal elites who want to be part of Europe and what have you, is one thing. And then the AKP Islamic Party of Mr. Erdogan, now in power since 2002, is something else. The Islamist government of Turkey, of AKP today, is one that is allied to the Muslim Brotherhood, that is allied to Nahda of Tunisia, that is supportive of the Salafi militias in Syria and in Libya. So they have their own network. And this is also not coming just from experts in this country. This is coming from many, many Arab analysts who understood that the Muslim Brotherhood are trying to establish a sort of a pan-Islamic caliphate and have been very critical of Mr. Erdogan siding. Although Turkey is a member of NATO, it is siding, though, with the Islamists and at some point with the jihadists against liberal societies. And last point on Turkey, well, the opposition to Mr. Erdogan has demonstrated over the past few months that it is vivid, and they are young and younger, and they are from women and males, and from majority and minority in Turkey, and they do not want to see a Turkey that is extremely Islamist as Mr. Erdogan, or as they accuse Mr. Erdogan of establishing.
I want to give you a few minutes here to talk about whatever's on your mind, or if there's anything you'd like to share with us that you're working on, or I don't know what kind of projects you have, books you're working on, or anything like that.
I'd be very happy to be given this opportunity to, first of all, thank you so much for this excellent show, for the work you're doing, because the media issue in America is very important, in the West in general. Our mainstream media, unfortunately, and because of many, many reasons, that goes back to the classroom. The newsroom is really a product of a classroom, and the classroom in America, meaning American universities, Middle Eastern programs, international relations, Islamic studies, have been impacted for the past 20, 30 years by an infusion of petrodollars, donations that had affected the task, the mission of a balanced education. Why do you think the American public, the American government was not prepared for the Arab Spring? Because the academia of America, the academic institution of America were not prepared, have not mentioned the fact that there are pushbacks against the jihadists, against the Islamists, against the authoritarian regimes. So my call here on these programs, I call them the parallel media, via Skype and email and internet, bloggers, free radio shows, Facebookers, the social media / alternative media is going to become very important. It's the alternative media to the mainstream media, not just in terms of general American politics, but also international relations. And you know, as far as I know, that most Americans today are not taking their news, the actual real news from TV set. They're taking it from internet. So that's an important evolution. I would call it even revolution happening. Second, with regard to my own work, I am pleased to say that I'm working now on a new book. My latest book, The Coming Revolution: Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, was published in 2010. It is the only book, and I'm proud of that achievement, that predicted the Arab Spring. And not just the Arab Spring, but also the waves of the Arab Spring. The first youth movement, and then followed by the Islamists' takeover of the Arab Spring, and now the pushback by the secular societies and the minorities. So that was a book that predicted 3 years. Now I'm working on a new book, hopefully to be published in 2014, that would be a critique of U.S. Foreign policy and a projection to the future, where we should be going from here on. That would be Syria, but of course Libya, Egypt, the peace process, what we should do to encourage, and obviously the big chunk, which is Iran and how to deal with Iran. So that's what I'm working on right now, in addition to my briefings to lawmakers on both sides of the Atlantic, in Congress and at the European Parliament.
Well, wonderful. Well, Dr. Phares, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We wish you success in your publications coming up, and I know there are many, many people who want to hear your opinion on Capitol Hill and around the world. We will have the recording of this show up both as a podcast and on the YouTube channel. You can find both of them at one2talk2.com. And those should be up later today, and I hope you'll share them with your followers, and we'll keep spreading the message of what's really going on out there so people can better understand the world. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for helping the world to understand what's happening, and thank you for your endeavor.
Thank you.